Thank you all. Thank you to my amazing guests here that we have today. Brian is joining us from Epic Games, Adam is joining us from Real Effects, and Chris is joining us from ICVR. Earlier, the first panel that we had, we talked about the pipeline part of virtual production, basically the tools and the infrastructure that's needed to allow for the storytelling part to happen, right? And we heard from Mariana, Ryan, and Igor, like some of the things these companies are working on, some of the solutions they're coming up with, and what are the challenges they're facing to enable storytelling at its finest. Now, in this panel, we're going to focus on a very specific part of storytelling, which is animation. Everybody loves animation. We grow up watching animation. And we wanted to talk about it a little bit about it, because traditionally, artists spend tremendous amount of time sketching and painting scenes frame by frame, and iterations used to take a long time at each step, which caused inefficiencies and increased costs on animation productions. But that started to change when CGI became a thing and technologies such as motion picture and real-time game engine started rising and being integrated on a larger role in each virtual production. So today, I am very proud to be joined by experts and virtual production pioneers who are really at the forefront of this revolution. We're going to talk about, how these game engines are being integrated, what are they doing, and how they're creating a shift. So let's start with introductions. Brian, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Epic.
Sure. Again, my name is Brian Poole. I'm the technical program manager for the Unreal Fellowship at Epic. My background within the company is kind of been a dual role for a while. I was a technical account manager helping clients integrate Unreal Engine into their workflows and their pipelines. And then I recently moved over to the educational department to kind of spearhead the fellowship and to increase the number of training opportunities for people who are either being retrained into virtual production and upskilling their capabilities and talents, and also dealing with students both from secondary and post secondary schools and such. My whole background is in pre-visualization and film production. I've done about 17, 18 years as a previous supervisor working for an array of different companies on several different films, and I'm really enjoying my time at Epic now, and we've got lots to share.
Yeah, you definitely do, and thanks for all the work you're doing on the educational side, because in the prior panel everybody was talking about the lack of talent globally right now. Like everybody's trying, if you find somebody, just grab them, just hold them, don't let go. So thanks for trying to increase that pool of talent. It's really valuable. Adam, thank you for joining us today. Adam, tell us a little bit about yourself, the incredible stuff you're doing at Real Effects, and prior to that.
Yeah, thanks for having us, first of all. And my name is Adam Meyer. I am a creative producer over at Real Effects. So that entails a number of things, and it entails a number of things beyond that role itself. So as a creative producer, I do help with development of in-house original projects, working with the directors, working with the writers, the showrunners, working to kind of create new properties. But for us, it's also very much with this idea of virtual production and real-time rendering in mind. So I do come from a background of virtual production, of animation, actually, and of film production and visual effects. So I've touched a lot of different places there, but I started out as an animator, working in video games, working in film and television, and kind of found myself in the world of virtual reality, starting to dabble in game engines in ways to help push forward kind of how we use that in a narrative sense. Worked at the Fox VFX lab for a while on films such as Call of the Wild. There was a demo that came out for something called Mouse Guard, which was in development there for a while, and pushing up forward a lot of the real-time efforts there. So I was the head of the real-time department over at the Fox VFX lab, and moved over to RealFX to start to build something really incredible over here, where we're really looking to take the next step of what we've been seeing in virtual production in previs and pulling that into animation as well, which we'll talk about a little bit probably in this, how that's different from what's being done in the visual effects world, and really exciting in my mind, and maybe something that's not being done quite as much these days, or you're not seeing quite as much these days. Yeah,
we're very excited about that. That's why I'm like, you know what, for this topic we gotta have Adam. He's in the action, so he can give us a lot of insight. Chris, thank you for joining us today. I know you're having sleepless nights in the past few nights and you're extremely busy, so thank you for giving me this hour today. Please tell us a little bit about what you do. I mean, I know what you do, but for the sake of our audience.
Yeah, of course. My name is Chris. I'm the Chief of Product at ICVR. So really, it's kind of a role where I end up wearing a lot of hats between creative director, project manager, writer, sometimes workflow supervisor, designer, and that type of thing. And also found myself doing a lot of education lately as well for a lot of the client projects that we've been doing most recently. My background is really comes from game design and production. And in fact, ICVR was originally founded as a game development studio. And our main focus has always been, and really will remain, game engines. So we have a lot of experience working primarily in Unreal Engine and Unity. And through the evolution of our company and the projects that we've been working on, one of the things that I'm sure we all realize, that game engines have come to be used for much more than just game development. And in recent years, we've really found ourselves working on a lot of virtual production projects and other things in that sphere that utilize game engines. So that's kind of what has brought us here. So I'm really happy to be here with both Brian and Adam, and thank you guys. Looking forward to this.
You just brought up a really good thing, which is, game engines existed for like almost 3 decades more, at least for Epic. Unreal existed almost 29 years now, quite long time. But why only recently it became a thing for film and TV productions? Like, so for 29 years, Unreal Engine existed. Lots of awesome production, lots of awesome games that I might personally played and still play. But what changed? What happened now that we're using it for film and TV? Brian, can you tell us?
Well, I mean, in the immediate history of why, COVID-19 was a big game changer, of how to address production in a way that would, lower risk and profiles for, bringing tons of people together. So with the advent of that, it was like somehow we had to leverage real-time technology, multi-user technology, being able to work virtually. The whole aspect of virtual production is all catered towards, in many ways, addressing that concern. So when COVID-19 hit, it was definitely, the studios were sent kind of scrambling to how can we address and meet these requirements, still stay productive, still produce content, but without exposing our crews to risk. So game engine technology was kind of like a big shining star saying, hey, look, you can use this to do collaborative projects. You can use it to potentially work together without exposing your crew to risk. It has the real-time aspect of things. So it was it was in the right place at the right time. I mean, you're right. Game engines have been used in the past for productions, at least in a, perhaps in a pre-visualization kind of context. They were using game engines on a number of different films in the past before, what we're experiencing now. Whether it was with CryEngine or with Unreal Engine or with Unity, all three of these engines were deployed to do pre-visualization style services. COVID and virtual production has kind of pushed things forward to integrate live action and LED walls and all that kind of thing is now coming to the forefront. And
I know you guys at Epic now kind of like probably in the past couple of years, you kind of have shifted your entire list of priorities and what to focus on with feature production when it comes to the engine to address that. And we see that a lot in Unreal 5 and 4.27 as well.
Yeah, 4.27 is very specific for virtual production features, whereas Unreal Engine 5 is addressing all these type of new technologies with Lumen and Nanite. But we're going to be bringing those all together in the future, so that you'll have all the virtual production features in Unreal Engine 5, in due time.
Which is awesome. Now, Adam, I mean, you've had the experience of, I mean, Brian, you as well, but Adam, like also with Farks VFX, you mentioned Call of the Wild, right? Big project. Watched the film 3 times. I like it. So when it comes to productions like that, or even a more traditional animation production, one of the, let's look at Pixar, for example, and all these awesome Academy Award winners. Usually, what a lot of people don't know, it comes with a pretty hefty price tag when it comes to creating those incredible Pixar pictures, right? Yes. I mean, on average, not all, but some of the most recent ones, at least in the past few years, on average, you're talking about $1 million a minute when it comes to cost. But that's not necessarily the case, at least from what we have been watching in the most recent, like, couple Netflix productions, animation productions that utilize Unreal Engine. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I believe at RealFX, you guys are, on that route as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think Brian's point about COVID is really interesting and very true. There's been a big explosion in kind of usage of virtual production, especially in the VFX space, right? And for us, actually, it was more of a challenge because we were really going into this wanting to use virtual production, wanting to use motion capture, and it was an instance of trying to convince the studios and the financiers to say, hey, actually, we want to go on set and we want to be around a number of people, but we can do so in a way that is much smaller than a normal production because of this technology. But we're still kind of convincing them to let us go out and do something that's very different from the traditional workflow. For us, a big thing, and because we started on the productions we're currently in right now, we started on these before this hit, and we very much had to pivot. And fortunately, because of this technology, we could do so. But some of the things that really led us to believe that this was ready for the prime time there was probably a number of technologies maturing at one time, but one of the biggest and most obvious, I think, is real-time ray tracing. That one simply allowed us to say, hey, the fidelity is there, that we can get a final pixel out of the game engine without having to go through this kind of previs workflow, this virtual production workflow up front, and then push it off to another application to go render out of, which requires a lot of passing back and forth of data, which can get complex. It can get a little bit more difficult in that way. If you can kind of stay within the same application, within the same DCC, you can also get the wins of the things that the game engines bring, like real-time rendering. So, we're talking about real-time ray tracing. Well, that's really fast ray tracing, right? So we can save time and money in lighting, and we can also start to see lighting at the very beginning of the process. So we were very interested in those creative wins of virtual production, in being able to finally visualize in animation lighting at the beginning of the process, which is, for someone in live action, a given, right? You can light your people on set, you can light the set, you see it in camera. For us in animation, it was always, we're going to go do storyboards, we're going to do layout, and a lot of it's going to be grayscale. We're looking at the composition in camera, and we're kind of planning the lighting, right? But we're not really going to get to do it until we're on a shot-by-shot basis with this. We were really excited about those creative wins, about we can get in camera and we can see lighting, we can change lighting live on set. We can then push that through, and now our lighting is halfway there because we've already thought about it when we're shooting. And it's much faster to do because we can see the changes instantaneously. We can jump into, sequencer and have a bunch of shots laid out, and we can see what those changes look like shot to shot without having to push through a render farm, go do compositing steps, everything like that before we even see two shots next to one another. So I think real-time ray tracing is a big one. There are obviously these other technologies such as motion capture, virtual cameras, and really, people like Epic embracing those technologies and bringing them into the game engine in a much more seamless way. Being able to stream live motion capture, that's something that before LiveLink even existed, we were doing on Welcome to Morrowind. And that kind of, showed us what was possible in terms of that visualization live on set. So all of those things, I think, pushed us into this world. And really, I think the other big things that we don't maybe talk about as much are the metaverse, are being able to reuse these assets for games. The importance of games in society today and how big they've ballooned, which also puts a focus on those things and an understanding that the audience, they're getting cinematics in games and they're getting some really cool ones. I got the benefit to work on some of those on Uncharted and some of these other games. Yep. And I love watching those things, on YouTube. They've got them all strung out together, and you can watch these beautiful stories that are rendered in game engine. So it's been being done just in a different context in some ways. And we're finally learning from that.
Which is a point that Ryan brought up in the previous panel from Perforce, brought up the exact same point. I mean, he's like, right now, like for example, some of the most traditional pipelines, studios are creating assets to do previs and spending time and money on it. But then when it goes to post, they start from scratch. And all that time and money, that was just wasted, burned, and gone. However, to your point, that whole process is being redesigned into now. Start from all assets and props that you need to create, go for high fidelity, go for final pixel, and that's how you start your production. And it's not going to be only utilized for that specific project, whether it's episodic or feature, but also for other type of products, whether it's utilized in a game, in a game or an experiential experience, immersive experience, whether it's whatever you might want to utilize in the whole holy grail of metaverse, right? So it makes total sense. Now, Chris, I know that's something that you are dealing a lot with, which is how to make it efficient. Now Adam has touched a lot of great points of efficiencies of like how it used to be, but how now things are getting faster. But I know that you're dealing a lot of that when it comes to designing like some of these pipelines and tools, right? Like we need to do X, Y, and Z, but instead of this process taking 6 months now and costing some amount of money, we need a lot of automations. We need a lot of kind of seamless integrations and seamless ways to review all that content in real time. How does working with Unreal make that possible, or Unity? Because I know we work also a lot using Unity.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that you guys touched on is just being able to do more in one place. So being able to accomplish more of your steps within Unreal Engine, for example, and not having to pass off assets. And I think that the biggest no-brainer of doing final rendering in Unreal Engine is that, as you said, you're already doing your previs, you're already doing your motion capture and starting to set up layouts within Unreal Engine. So having to take all of this stuff that you've put together and then pass it off to another program for final rendering is an extremely kind of difficult and frustrating, and by extension costly step. So I think it's just a natural extension of, you know, the evolution of game engine rendering technology and hardware getting better, that if you can afford to do the final rendering in the place where you're already doing your previs and, you know, a lot of your production earlier on, then that's a big cost saver.
Awesome. So what, from everything that I've heard so far from all three of you, like, are you all saying that at the current state, it's possible to produce a full feature or episodic in Unreal? Is that what I'm hearing?
100% yes.
Without question.
And
Okay.
I can say that because we are doing it right now.
Oh, I want to hear all about it. I know you probably can't say much, but if you can, please do.
Yeah, I probably can't say too much, but I can say a little bit. You know, we are currently working on producing a show fully rendered out of Unreal Engine, and actually using the engine for a number of steps along the process, right? So we are fully embracing virtual production. We're using motion capture and virtual cameras to give us a really dynamic show. It still embraces the ethos of what Real Effects is, where we are an animation studio and we're very much about beautiful stylized animation and really trusting the eye of the artist and the animator. So this is going to be a very fun show in a lot of ways. And we're really excited about using this technology to do so. And we're already seeing a lot of wins. We're also seeing, you know, a lot of challenges because we're building a new pipeline. We're training a lot of new people up on, you know, how to do things in this new way. But there's a lot of excitement, I think, across the studio, across, you know, even the studio that is financing this, from what we're getting from this workflow. And I think the render quality of it is very high as well. You know, can we match the Pixar level final renders at the moment coming out of a game engine? Probably not. But we're getting there, and it's moving very quickly in that direction. And, you know, we can meet and even exceed what we're seeing on television right now. And you are seeing people actually start to create feature films as well using game engine technology that honestly look good.
I'd like to point out something just for an interesting note and comparison. You know, the Unreal Fellowship, we've had approximately or close to 500 graduates come through the program. If the average graduate produces a 2-minute short film on average, the fellowship over a span of roughly, you know, less than a year and a half have generated over 10.5 hours worth of animated content. So, you know, that's the equivalent of about 10.5 feature films, 90 minutes in length. So it just kind of, this is a completely different set of people each individual term, but from a distributed point of view of being able to work together with people online and virtually, the amount of footage that we've been able to generate and produce, like I said, nearly 10.5 animated feature films in length worth of work. So can somebody do it? 100%, absolutely. Can it be done with smaller sized teams? Yes, I also agree that that's fully possible. Can your budgets, you know, swell to become larger and, you know, cost more? Of course. You know, new technology does not necessarily mean it's going to become and be cheaper. You know, there are going to be other things that are going to come into play, whether it's, you know, hiring new types of people, probably having to, you know, even though you might be able to reduce costs on a rendering aspect because you're rendering things in real time on single GPUs and you can ditch the old render farm, you know, but you might wind up incurring costs in other areas. So in many respects, it does kind of balance out. However, you know, in general, I would say that it's all dependent upon the vision of the director, what he's trying to accomplish, and, you know, the resources that are at his disposal or her disposal. And, you know, so you could wind up with a project being very affordable or as expensive as. It just, a lot of it just depends.
And that makes total sense. Now, what do you think, like Brian, from your end at Epic, like for example, Adam brought up a very good point, which is at the current state today, we're still a little bit off Pixar's level of final pixel. Is Epic, I'm pretty sure that's something Epic is probably, looking at and trying to achieve. Is there anything that you can tell us that nobody knows about, that we should, be looking for?
Well, again, the subject of final pixels it's very subjective as far as the level, look, and quality of what you're wanting to achieve, the particular style. And in many respects, depending upon what your target output is for, what it's going to be, who it's going to be broadcast to or shown,
yep.
We can match that quality. Now, are there certain aspects of the ray tracing process that we're still developing? Sure, yes, of course. And we're starting to see that with Unreal Engine 5, with the advent of things like Lumen and global illumination being rendered on the GPU. But as far as like saying specifically, future feature sets, I'm not allowed. Sorry.
I mean, I can expand a little bit on what I mentioned as well. And I think something to point out is that we're moving towards that quality level at a pretty breakneck pace right now. I mean, what you've seen in the past couple of years from obviously the advent of ray tracing, but also, where Unreal has pushed hair, for instance. And, we're talking about Nanite and Lumen suddenly, breaking us a little more out of some of those. There are going to be new constraints, I'm sure, but some of those constraints with, poly count, those sorts of things, looking at the path tracer, for instance, and starting to see, this blending of things where you can really, you're not really real time there anymore, but you're still, getting a lot of those other creative wins off the back of what you can do in terms of the interactivity of a game engine. And then you also start to look at, we started talking a little bit about the metaverse, for instance, but you do have to make some sacrifices for real time always, right? Because of compute power, which I'm sure that'll continue to improve. But if you want your film to be interactive, which you can do now, you're going to make some of those sacrifices, and suddenly the focus is slightly on different things, right? We're not looking at every tiny little pixel. We're looking at how does my character interact with this world, and the user's focus is in a slightly different place.
Yep. Just to add to that too, I do think that one of the areas that real time has always kind of struggled, or like is struggling now to match a lot of the fidelity level of pre-rendered stuff, is in like simulation, for example. So Adam mentioned hair, water, other really complex calculations like that. And one of the good things too about Unreal, especially for animated content, which doesn't necessarily have to be real time at the time it's rendered, is that you can rely on a lot of the integrations from these other programs to do these simulations in another place and bake it out and move it into Unreal Engine so that you're still rendering it in Unreal, but you get the advantages of some of these external third-party programs.
Which realistically is not so different from a traditional workflow, right? If you're caching in Houdini, you may still be rendering in Maya.
Yeah.
I'd also like to point out too, if we look at recent advancements like adding metahumans into the pipeline and control rig into the pipeline, you're starting to see another aspect of the animation process moving in Engine, which we've never had before, and that is the ability to set up a control rig, be able to animate in Engine, which is, I think, crucial. So you start removing that back and forth process between a DCC and Engine. Now you can start doing it entirely within Engine, and this, as a result of having things like control rig at Engine, that's going to eventually spur on additional new technologies to address, improved deformations and, ways to deform geometries in real time using these control rigs. So you'll probably see, a lot of potential there as well.
That's one of the most exciting things to me, I think, about what you guys have been working on lately, Brian, is introducing ways to do more content authoring within Unreal itself. as opposed to having to rely on other programs. And that's always going to lead to more efficiency and, at the end of the day, make things look better if you don't have to constantly be passing them back and forth.
Actually, a very interesting question that I have that just popped up from, like from this discussions you guys were having. I know that from our experience, at least when it comes to virtual productions using LED walls, right? There are certain projects where we say, well, this project might not be a good fit for LED wall, or this portion of the script is not a good fit for an LED wall. Well, others might be better fit. So when it comes to like animation projects, in like if we want to do final rendering in Unreal Engine, is this a question at that end? Like, do you tell people, well, for that project, you should maybe consider final rendering in Unreal, or you should? Or is it best suited for any type of animation project?
It's a good question. I mean, I think for us, it's always going to be a question that needs to be asked for any project, right? I mean, just the same as, hey, is this best as an animated project, or is this best shot, live action? The same thing will always happen with the tools. What is the best way to put these together to achieve what we want? So there may be instances where we go, hey, because of this particular reason, or this particular production design of the show, we want the final render to be somewhere else. We're really trying to push what we're doing now with game engines and how much we're able to render out of there. But you have to remember, there's a lot of things that this one tool is providing us. So, you can still use the virtual camera side of things and the motion capture side of things, and kind of this, these previous workflows, and still push them into more traditional renderers if that is what the show calls for. I think there's a lot you can do in the engine right now. There's a lot you can do, and I think people are challenging themselves to do more and more. But for me, it's always about asking what the best amalgamation of tools and workflows are to get that creative vision.
One of the two great animation projects that came out in the last couple of years, Toy Story 4 and Love, Death and Robots, right? Two very interesting projects. One is a feature, one is episodic. With Toy Story 4, it was created using the traditional Toy Story style of animation workflows. They still use the frame-by-frame sketching and painting and iterations, which gives you that incredible Toy Story flavor, even though it's like a couple decades later. But with Love, Death and Robots, it definitely was a pivotal production. Maybe not necessarily for this, Brian, Adam, and Chris, but for sure for the audiences. Different flavor for each episode, the way it was created, because they depended a lot on virtual production pipelines, especially using Unreal Engine for that show. What's the driver behind these decisions? I mean, realistically, they worked on the two productions around the same time. So you as a creative or as a director or as a studio, what makes you choose which way to go? I know, Adam, you touched on this earlier, but Brian, Chris, please feel free to chime in. Like, why would you choose,
Sure.
or how would you choose which workflow to go after?
Yeah, for me, if I were approaching technology as a director, it would be stylistic choice that would drive my technology selection, in the way of how do I want my final product to look or act like. If I am a live action director that's trying to approach animated content, I might be a little more familiar with live action sensibilities, which from a virtual production standpoint is a much stronger driver of being able to get a director and kind of do some first unit previs, blocking out my shots in a volume with everybody participating. And that's more natural for me. My whole background is in live action production, previs. So that might feel more comfortable for me. Whereas another director, particularly those who are in animation circles, might turn more towards a traditional approach where they go through a dedicated story process. They have a story department, they tie into editorial, and they work through their creative thinking through that workflow. Others really want that hands-on spontaneity and that ability to make changes and adjustments at the moment. So if I were a director, I would be thinking about that, and that would certainly inform my choices as to what kind of technologies I would use.
So basically, you're saying that which makes total sense. The technology selection is really based on the creative drive and style. The technology is the vessel that allows the creative part to come out of the best shape, and not the technology that controls the creative side.
And that's what's so nice about these type of tools, though. You can embrace either style within this tool, but it's easier within something like Unreal or a real-time environment to mimic a live action type of look and feel and shooting style than it is perhaps, say, in traditional animation. But that doesn't preclude or limit you from using Unreal in a traditional capacity or more like a traditional capacity, and set things up with the story department. It's flexible, for sure.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, the director has a lot to do with that decision, right? If the director's not comfortable getting on stage with actors and they'd rather be going through a dedicated story process, you want to give them that, because you want to get the best story possible at the end of the day. Yeah, sorry, Chris.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think animation style too plays a lot into that. Like it was something like Toy Story where it's all going to be hand animated and you're not using, real-time performance capture. It's, you may not need the benefits of a game engine in that sense. However, if you're going to be doing your performance capture in a game engine, then it becomes a lot more advantageous to just continue working within that environment as you move forward.
I will say go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, but absolutely 100% correct in my opinion. But that's where then you can start to turn real-time technology for the animators over and say, hey, look, you want to do some real-time lighting? Explore that. Sure, no problem. You have a lot more iterative control, and that's one of the things. If I have had a couple of animated film projects under my belt in the traditional style, and just going in to weeklies with the director and having to go through that process of fighting through changes, making alterations and so forth, and then them having to wait a considerable amount of time to see those changes. Unreal Engine kind of removes some of that out of the picture and gives those directors within an animation circle a faster interaction time.
I could say it's from experience, it's super exciting for animators as well. They love being able to see their work, lit really quickly, in a more final state really quickly, instead of having to look at old OpenGL play blasts over and over again. That's been a great win. The other thing that I think potentially precludes it really is just the size and really the history of a number of these places. If you want to do something, if you want to move to doing something in the game engine, doing something in virtual production, you do have to build a pipeline around it, right? And a lot of these studios have sunk a lot of time, investment, and money in these traditional workflows. So it can be very hard to move a larger ship in that direction. And that's been one of the great things about RealFX in being, open and embracing kind of something new and crazy and different, and being willing to kind of say, hey, let's give this a go and let's make an investment in this. And that can be a big part of it as well. Whereas, back to Brian's point from earlier, I think COVID was actually a good way to kind of kick everybody in the pants and say, we gotta try doing something different. Let's give this a go.
Adam, you're always a great segue for the next point. I think that's like the fourth or fifth time today, which you're incredible. So thank you for that. But again, that's actually a segue for the next point, which is our last point before we open up the questions is on the animation field. I mean, again, you guys have mentioned, Brian, Adam, Chris, you have touched point that because of COVID, this process of pivot happened at a much higher rate, much faster pace. And instead of happening over the span of 10 years, it's happening now. It needed to happen now. But that's also leaving some people saying, well, it's a temporary trend because of COVID. But next year, hopefully, when we go back to the studios and our offices, we don't need to deal with that any longer. What do you guys think on that?
I would say don't rush to conclusions. I think a lot of people are starting to see the benefits of kind of a hybridized, mixed environment of working. People can still be equally productive working from home. And of course, now that Unreal offers multi-user editing capabilities, you can have one group doing some mocap on one part of the planet, and another group, taking a look at those cameras and layouts and have your art department somewhere else. Why should you limit yourself to going back to the old ways of doing things when it grants you so much more flexibility? Not to mention that, I know that there's a lot of implications from a business and tax perspective, but why not engage a global workforce? It'd be great to be able to say, oh, people on the opposite side of the planet will have that ready for you when you wake up in the morning. It's kind of nice. Especially
with what we were talking about before, in the initiatives that Brian and his team are doing in terms of education. But there are a lot of people trying to make a lot of content right now, which is wonderful for the people working in this industry because there are a lot of jobs. It's difficult for the studios, right? Because you have to find those people. So being able to utilize a global workforce is incredibly beneficial. Also, if I'm going to put on my producer hat from a visual effects standpoint, if you're telling me that I can now shoot, without a green screen, and I can get some of my shots directly off of stage, and I can do so with a smaller crew, which, after the initial investment may end up being cheaper, there's nothing but wins there. To me, that would be like, asking if green screens or something like that, when that first came around, was going to be, a temporary fad. These tools are going to continue to be used, and people, I think, now are just learning about the benefits of them. And we're not going to get it right 100% of the time, but we're going to very quickly learn how to do it best. And so I think there's no way that this is a fad. I think it's just, everyone going to be learning very quickly how best to do this and improve on it.
Yeah.
Chris loves multi-user. I just want to say Chris loves the multi-user, Brian, but go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I think if you are hearing that from some people, I think every time there is kind of a new hot piece of technology that people don't necessarily understand, there's always the danger of people over-representing, what this technology can do, how it works, or maybe shoehorning it into situations where it really shouldn't be used. And I think if you look at like LED wall virtual production, that's the perfect example of that, where people are saying, you can shoot anything, you can do a whole production on LED wall and do any shot that you want. And I think, as Adam touched on before, it's a matter of applying the tools to the correct use cases. And I think in terms of virtual production, like we're still very early with a lot of these tools, and look how powerful they already are. And I think it's inevitable that it's going to continue becoming a larger part of a lot of productions as the technology gets better and better, as hardware gets better and better, and as more people learn how to actually use it and create content with it.
if anything is going to be temporary, and I might be totally off on this, but it would be the term virtual production.
Yeah.
Because I think this technology is going to become, as it becomes more and more mainstream, people understand
the normal production.
It's going to be production.
Well,
Right?
we saw the same thing with pre-visualization. 10 years ago when we started the whole concept and workflow of doing pre-visualization, it was the term previs, and we have all these vizzes, tech viz and post viz and that viz and this viz, but now it's just basically visualization. And I agree with Adam. I think it won't be delineated anymore and saying it's virtual production. It will become mainstream production, in my opinion.
Which yep, totally agree with that. Well, thank you all. Like, this has been a tremendous conversation. Like, it's been great. I have more, but I know all of you have other things to do. So before we wrap, I don't know, Caroline, if we have any questions from audience that our awesome speakers can answer. Otherwise, I really want to let them go to do their daily jobs.
No, we don't have any questions that have come through in the chat. But again, if any of you have a chance to go and do a bit of networking, I'm sure people would love to catch up with you. But no, that was an absolutely fantastic session. So thank you all so much for joining us today.
Yep. Thank you all. I really appreciate you. I know you all are busy. Probably Brian is on stage. So if you all, thank you. Appreciate your time. I hope everybody enjoyed these two sessions today. We tried to give you a little bit of insight from people who are actually doing the work. I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us or Brian or Adam or Chris. They're, easy people to talk to. You can find them on LinkedIn and ask them all the questions. Thank you all.